Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Just Two Dads with my co-host and partner in Thrive, Mr. Sean Francis. I am Brian Altunian. Today, we have a very special guest, somebody that we have been excited to talk about for quite some time. You're going to hear some great stories of motherhood and being a warrior mom and an activist for so many things. So people that are impacted by autism and other special needs issues and much, much more. Great special guest, Robinson Peete is going to be here. So hang on for another episode of Just Two Dads. Almost sounds official, doesn't it? Sounds like something that we're doing. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Brian Altunian here with Sean Francis and our special guest, Robinson Peete. Want to welcome everybody who's catching us on Facebook Live. You may not be able to interact with us because I'm just going to cop to it right now. We're very, very transparent. Holly, sometimes like very first episodes, we were doing this almost by hand, like on a speaker phone with people. We've completely grown up since then. But we're catching this. We're recording this on a Tuesday and sending it out on Wednesday today. But please feel free to comment because we read the comments. We share the comments with our guests. So if you're catching us on Facebook Live, welcome back. And if not, and you're catching us on our YouTube channel, we are Just Two Dads. Please, again, we read all the comments, share, subscribe to our channel, share the episode with as many people as you'd like. And if you're hearing us on podcast outlets everywhere, welcome. We love the interaction. We're also down at U.S. Virgin Islands on WSTX AM radio and on Roku channel under Empower Media. So we're starting to expand our reach, which we're really excited. So without further ado, don't want to take any time away from our amazing guest. I'm going to throw it over to Sean and greet you, my friend. How are you feeling today? Feeling pretty good, aren't you?
Blessed and thankful as always. I mean, I always am. Like you said, people probably hear me say that when you ask it, and I really think about what the challenge of my day might be, and it all pales in comparison, especially when we get to this portion of the day. And like I always say, your biggest nightmares are somebody else's dreams. And I want to waste no more time talking about myself and just introduce and give a big welcome to our guest, Robinson Peete.
Woo. Hey.
Hi, I'm here. I'm just enjoying watching you and I love being here. This is I've had one of those crazy days. It is cocktail hour where I am. That's why I got this t-shirt on. No, that's not why. The reason why is because I'm moving, and everybody knows that when you move, you find old stuff in storage that you really don't know why you've been paying all these years to store crap like a shirt like this. But when I put it on, I felt like, okay, it's cocktail hour. I'm talking to a couple dads. So here we go.
Awesome. But you know what fits with that? And this, like you were saying earlier off camera, talking about the synergy and stuff. And not only how many things we have in common and the people that we know being in the same room at a party of princes 30 years ago. And like, wait a minute, when your assistant reached out and wanted to know, like, okay, so, what's the setup? Are you on camera and everything? I was like, wait a minute, am I going to be presentable enough? Holly's going to be on here. And so for you to be on here with a t-shirt and it's just real, that is exactly how we fly and roll. And so, you might probably see yourself as somebody just doing what they have to do. So you don't see yourself as a hero, but I'm here to tell you that you're wrong. And all heroes have powers, and those superpowers come from our origin. So let's start with that and tell us a little bit about, that you're originally from Philadelphia. But start with that and your dad's work and all that kind of stuff. Why don't we begin with that?
Well, like almost everybody I know that's my age and a lot of younger folks as well. I literally grew up on Sesame Street. So my father was the original Gordon back in '69 when the show premiered. Crazy things were going on in '69, but I was 4 or 5 years old. I mean, I really didn't know all the craziness that was going on because I was living this great life in Philadelphia, great neighborhood called Mount Airy. If anybody's from Philly, it's just such a great neighborhood, so perfectly integrated. And there's, everybody in the neighborhood was somebody from a different place, and it was just utopic. It was just awesome. So grew up in Philly, grew up in Mount Airy. When my dad got Sesame Street, he started commuting back and forth to New York. That didn't do great things for my mom and dad's marriage. And so they ended up getting divorced and or splitting up around that time. But all I cared about was, why can't I be on Sesame Street?
Right?
Aren't you sad that I'm like, people that knew me back then was like, your goal was just to get on the show. And I'm like, yeah, my dad was Gordon. Like, where was the nepotism for me? None of it was. And so literally, I begged and pleaded, because everybody on my block got to go up and be on the show. And literally I begged and pleaded, finally got on. My dad didn't want me to go on because he didn't want me to be a show business kid.
Yeah, good. That worked out. That worked out.
Well, you're going to get up here. You're going to see all the lights, and you're going to walk down the street talking to a 10-foot bird and a green guy in a trash can, and you're going to Cookie Monster. I mean, you're going to want to do this, and I want a senator for a daughter. I don't want an actress. I want a lawyer, a doctor, anything but an actress. So that was why he was pushing back. So, but he gave in. Finally, I got up there. I had one line, and I blew my one line.
No.
Oh my gosh.
I was supposed to say hi, Gordon, but I kept saying hi, Daddy, and it was just. I'm still in therapy 50 years later. Over that one moment. So, it literally and figuratively shaped my life, and it was such an amazing show. I remember my dad telling me about the pitch. It's a show that takes place on a city block, and I'm like, back then we had like Captain Kangaroo, and we didn't really have Romper Room. Yeah, we didn't have anything like that. And I was like, it'll never work, Dad. It'll never work. Who wants to see that? And
there were few, if any, of us. Yeah.
Yes, of course. Here we are, 50-something years later, and it's still on, and still as relevant as ever, and still advocating, and still doing diverse philanthropy across the world globally. And I was telling you guys earlier that I definitely want everyone to watch this HBO Max doc. It's so good, called Street Gang: How I Got to Sesame Street, or how we got to Sesame Street, because my brother, my mom, and I got to sort of tell the story about, what it was like for my dad, since he's not here. He's been gone 19 years. And yeah, so that's really like the origins of it. And then my mom is like, she gets this big idea that she's going to go across the country like Alice. And that's a dated reference, but that was a show about a woman who's Linda Lavin. Okay. See, we all from the same, but Alice was a story about, a woman fleeing a divorce and going to work and kiss my grits and all the little stuff it was a great show. So my mom did sort of her version of that show, moving from Philly she really was a school teacher, and she did a little local TV in Philly, but she was like, met some people who made her think that she could go out and create a better life for her kids. And so we drove to Malibu, cross country, in old beat up Volvo with $1 and a nickel to our name. It was the worst trip of my life at 9 years old. Why? Because she wouldn't let us bring our family dog. So here I am, 9. I'm leaving Mount Airy, leaving this utopian neighborhood, to go to all white Malibu. Nothing wrong. White people love white people. But I wanted some diversity. Like, it was just me and Flip Wilson's kids.
What was the dog's name?
Really, Sean? Schiller.
Really?
Thank you, Sean.
Sorry.
Schiller. We always named our dogs after just philosophers. We had animals. This might tell you a little insight about what kind of a family we're. Our animals were always named crazy names, but full names, people's names. We had a Schiller, who was the German philosopher, I guess, right? And then had Huey P. Newton.
Nice.
That was our cat's name.
Nice.
Our cat's name was Huey P. Newton. So we had a Black Panther, a German philosopher, and then there was Laura Danker. So now you guys wouldn't know Laura Danker because she was a character in a book called Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret.
Me, Margaret. No,
Wow.
I have daughters, so I'm familiar with it, but I didn't read it. So.
There you go. So if you have daughters, everyone knows this book. It's the most iconic book. And when I read that book at 9 years old, it changed my life. And I named my hamster after one of the characters named Laura Danker. Ask your daughters, Brian, about And Laura was the one girl who like started to sprout boobs, and she was growing, and she was everyone wanted to be Laura Danker. Don't ask me why I named my hamster Laura Danker, but so we pack up. My mom, I negotiate. Laura Danker gets to go to Malibu, right?
Laura goes, right.
But she wouldn't let me bring in any of the motels we stopped in, so she froze to death in the car.
Oh no!
Oh my God!
But my mom, whose head was down because she was, driving to a new life, she didn't have no time for no dogs or no hamsters or anything, told me that she was not really dead. She was just kind of petrified, right? Like she was frozen temporarily, and was when she warmed up, she'd be all right. So I'm thinking, can we just get somewhere warm? Philly, Ohio, Missouri. We finally get to the Mojave Desert, which is the end of the trip. And so I'm like, is it warm? Can we like take her out? And she's like, you know what, Holly? Why don't we leave Laura here in the desert for a better life? Because she'll be happier here.
Oh my God.
I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. So we leave Laura in the desert, take off. There's me looking out the back window, waving bye to Laura. She's like, Laura's frozen, right?
Yeah.
And then we get to Malibu, and then that's the beginning of this new life for me and my brother. Now, I went to school at Webster Elementary School, and again, there was only one other Black girl in the school. But when I got there, no one wanted to take me around, like, who's going to be Holly's guide today? And then the 5th grade teacher, Mrs. Nielsen, you never forget these names because she hooked me up. Holly's dad is the Gordon on Sesame Street, and they were like, oh, okay. So that was a hookup. That was the nepotism. That was the payoff I got.
Right? There you go. There you go.
So I go around the school. They're everybody's rushing me to introduce me to Piper. You got to meet Piper. Only other Black girl in the school. So that was a tough time for me. My brother, 3 years older, by the way, and I forgot this part, very, very important part. And then this will be the end of this chapter. But this is important because you guys will appreciate this. Where we were staying was at the beach house of an actor who was a friend of my mom's, who said, I'll let you stay here for free for 6 months to get on your feet. And the actor was Cleavon Little from Blazing Saddles.
No way.
Okay.
Sheriff Bart.
Yeah.
And an amazing guy. And so Uncle Cleavon is the one that kicked this all off, right? Letting us stay there.
Yeah.
So we go to his beach house. We're staying in this little apartment. And or it's not an apartment, it's a house on the beach, but it's kind of small. And so I go to school. I have a bad experience at school, but Matt goes to school, the junior high. I was at the elementary school, and makes friends with a kid named Chad McQueen. And then Chad McQueen says, come on, you just stay at my house. And he's got this big old house, Broad Beach, Trancas. So I'm struggling to get anybody to raise their damn hand to walk me around the school. And Matt's at Steve McQueen's house.
Steve McQueen's house.
That's hilarious.
It's a little different. Different experience.
Like, Allie who? Allie McGraw. I'm like, oh, no. Wow.
You know what I'm seeing here though? There's a whole lot of fate and synergy that takes place here in every piece of it. Because the one thing that you said that stood out is like you were talking about. I know it sounded funny, but you meant it literally. Like, yeah, somebody convinced my mom, had her believe that she could do so and so. There's so much value in us having people like that in our lives.
Yeah,
that's right. Sure. That's right. I mean, she had the audacity to dream big. It came at the expense of Laura Danker in the Mojave.
Well, you chose good names for your pet. That's my wife's first name. So.
Oh, okay. So.
Yeah, but Laura Danker became somebody's dinner that night. You probably saved a critter in the desert. So
there you go.
Circle of life.
Sacrifice.
To this day, can't drive through the Mojave. I can't do it. I can't do it. We went to Super Bowl in Phoenix, and then Rodney's like, let's drive. And I'm like, Mojave came. I just put my head down. And then at one point, I rolled down the window. Laura. I thought maybe it had been, 30 years.
Yeah,
maybe you never know.
You never know.
Maybe she's balling out there. But anyway, that is pretty much a snapshot of my early days that really set me up to think that there wasn't a whole lot that I couldn't do either, right? That I could do stuff. And moving, like fast forward and many years later, when I was 19 and in college, I became the caregiver for my dad who had Parkinson's disease. This was in the 80s, before Google, before Muhammad Ali came out talking about it, and Michael J. Fox. And it was a really dark time because I thought I was going to quit college to go take care of him, and he would not hear of it. But so I kind of did both, juggling that. So I was a caregiver at 19. That kind of kickstarted me into the world of caregiving, the world of, health and wellness, and supporting, people who were caregivers. That was pretty amazing. And I was so young, right? Wasn't on Sesame Street, Jump Street yet. So I was really struggling to try to figure out how to navigate that. So I skipped a lot of part in between, but mostly those are the sort of three defining moments: Sesame Street, Malibu, and then when my dad got sick.
Where'd you go to school, by the way? Just curious.
It's Sarah Lawrence, a small
Sarah Lawrence
school,
right.
up in New York, yeah. And my dad was ironically working on the Cosby Show. He was the producer and writer of the Cosby Show. So when you are on a hit TV show like that as a writer, it's a grueling job physically. And so, it was, this never comes out right now because of all the stuff we know. And I'm kind of glad my dad didn't see all that stuff that happened with Bill, but because they were friends in Philly, like back old school Philly friends. So yeah, he did keep him on the staff when he didn't have to. So I mean, there's tons of stories of amazing things that he did, but then when you juxtapose the other stuff, it's pretty crazy. But so those were the things that really defined, I think, who I am. And then as I became a mom, and then was in the sandwich generation, taking care of my dad and my son, dad with Parkinson's, and my son with autism, I think I drew from a lot of those experiences.
Wow. And it's funny because I thought that, and I've accepted that we're going to kind of not be completely chronological here and bounce around, but I've told Brian this before, and I'll say the same to you, which is that having, my son, our son Elijah is 15. He was diagnosed at the age of 3. So what you have in terms of resources and fellowship and community, for an autism diagnosis in the early to mid 2000s is a far cry from anything you have from the 90s. And I ask a question that I kind of already know the answer to, which is kind of like, oh my gosh, like, how did you do that? Because, Brian talks about, there's, very limited internet, nothing like that. So you're caring for your dad. And at this point, when you're in college, you're in New York, your dad is there as well. You're caring for him. So then how about take us from the transition there to becoming a mom and in the path between there and then your son RJ's diagnosis and everything.
Yeah, so I was at Sarah Lawrence. He wouldn't let me quit. So I would spend days at school and then go down to Manhattan at night just to take care for him, make sure he was okay. Making sure that he kept that job. That was key, that he kept that writer's job, because Parkinson's was woefully unaffordable. And you had to have that Cinemet, those drugs, just so you could get up and unfold your body and go to work. And then so I just knew so much about Parkinson's before I was 20 years old. So did all that, and then literally graduated from college, did a junior year abroad in France, which was my dream, and didn't want to go because I didn't want to leave my dad. Oh no, you are going. And my dad was hilariously funny, like, and a gifted writer. And so everything he said to me had some crazy comical and historical reference. Like, I'll never for Paris, and he gave me an American Express card, and I said I could only use it for emergencies. And I was like, well, now let's define emergency. And he was like, remember when Marie Antoinette had her head under the guillotine?
That's an emergency.
It's an emergency.
That's who he was. Brilliant comedy writer.
Hilarious.
And just this amazing man. And so later on, I graduated, dated around, dated some scrubs, met and married Rodney Peete in 95. We got pregnant 2 years later with twins. RJ was born in 97. And then noticed about 2 years old, like he just stopped his communication with his twin sister. And it was all very awkward and weird. In 2000, got the diagnosis. And then, the infamous never day I always talk about, when they told us all these things he would never do and never be. And, obviously we've got some great receipts on that. And like, we've been able to overcome that. And I tell that story and show that story through social media and through our reality shows and just everything I do, because I didn't see any example of that when we got this diagnosis. I saw nobody advocating. Take that back. 2 quarterbacks, Dan Marino and Doug Flutie. They both were sort of advocating for their kids or coming out and talking. But I saw big stars in Hollywood who I knew had kids with autism who did not speak on it. And I felt like, why? Like, if I could right now call this person and go, can you tell me what your experience has been like, and your son's 10 or whatever, that would have been so helpful. So I decided on that day that, along with getting RJ, all the therapies he needed, and trying to, roll up my sleeves and be a gangster mom for him and do whatever I could, that I was going to use my platform in the biggest, widest, loudest way, because of the lack of people that I saw doing it. Again, it's not for everybody. It's not a judgment, because not everybody can or is willing to put their kids on blast or let their kid. I mean, Rodney didn't want me to do it. He didn't want to have the poster child situation.
It's so funny you say that, because there's a couple things I'm going to touch on. One, it just dawned on me, and Brian, I've never told you this. The first time I ever heard of the word autism, Sylvester Stallone and his late son, Sage, were, oh man, sorry. We're on the cover of People magazine in, I think it was like 80s or something like that. And I saw the word, and I don't know if I read the article. I think I might have glanced over, but didn't necessarily know what it meant. Fast forward, all these years go by, and I don't remember any conversation taking place. And again, I'm trying to stick to things chronologically here, but we're having such a good conversation.
No,
We have
it's
to go with
hard.
the flow.
It all glosses together.
Right. But the one thing you brought about, all my posts for the, like my own social media posts for the month of April, talking about autism awareness and everything, I have noticed something that has been around for the past couple years, but really amongst, is existent now, which is the division within the autism community, which is, here's how you advocate, here's how you do this, here's how you do that, putting your child out there and all that kind of stuff. So talk a little bit about that, when you said, like, Rodney didn't, want you to do that, because I admit I put less images of my son and I, or on, out there, at all. And there's people that, relate to that, but people have different ways of parenting, different ways of coping. And, there's such division amongst the autism community right now. Even if you look at this month, it's autism awareness. No, it's autism acceptance. No, don't call it that. Not like, we need more love and less judgment.
I'm old enough to remember when I was first finding out about autism therapies, and there was this like Hatfield and McCoy's feud about ABA versus floor time. And I was like, well, can we do a mashup? Can we do both? Because ABA, they were saying, oh, your kids are kind of robotic, but floor time, they're a little bit more, spontaneous. And so I'm like, well, let's do both, which we did. But I was shocked at how many people were like, well, you got to choose one or the other, and this one looks down on that one, and it was just a mess. I've noticed that too. I've noticed that with the self-identifying with autistic versus having autism. That's the other one that can really get people's feathers ruffled. And I've had people come up on my page saying, stop saying your son has autism, because it's not something he has, it's who he is. And I said, I'm not sure who you are to tell me who my son is. And he doesn't say that. And if he self-identifies in a different way, and he's a grown-ass man, then he's allowed to do that.
Thank you.
But I also do understand more and more now. I used to be a little fist balled up on this one, but I do understand now, because a lot of these kids are my son's age and have become advocates and actually autistic, and they have hashtags, and they're very, they're like activists, and they're very strong in how they express themselves, which I understand, and I'm okay with that. I mean, I did a movie on, not to jump around, but a movie on Hallmark Channel called Our Christmas Journey, which was about a family dealing with autism. And
That's
my
right.
son that plays my son, the actor that plays my son, always refers to himself as autistic. But he hears me saying, well, RJ has autism, and if you have autism, and that's okay, right? So it's like you got to identify however you want. And he was so sweet about, like, well, I always say I'm autistic. I am autistic. Now, when I was coming up in the autism journey, I was told by therapists or that we use person first language, so we don't necessarily identify. We talk about the child first, and then the child has something. So, but now that's like a bad word in this community in certain areas. So there are a lot of that going on, but I'm trying to be, as I get a little older, just listen, just listen.
Well, it's simple. It's simple though, because your approach, what you just said, like for instance, what have I done? Because I try to post something every day in the month of April with regard to the awareness, right?
Sure.
And then tying in the financial literacy, because Brian and I work in financial services, and April is also financial literacy month. What I've done is I just put, autism awareness / acceptance. And it doesn't have to be either or. And for those that can express themselves, because Elijah is 15, he's verbal, but he's not able to express how he feels about it being, about being identified. And I don't fully know if he's aware of the fact that he has autism. So, and it's interesting, that takes me to a point where I've always wanted to ask you this. So you're talking about diagnosis at 2000, less resources. RJ was completely nonverbal for a period of time, right? And so I know that it's in at least one of your books, because I've read yours and Rodney's, but tell us, if you will, like, how did you get from like, okay, he's not speaking, he's not going to the point where now, you're looking at him expressing himself, it's hard to see that.
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, when he was a little boy, and you read in Rodney's book, he would come to the games, his football games, and everybody else's kid is running around the locker room like, well, we didn't have selfies back then, but taking pictures and like
engaging,
just engaging and connecting and getting autographs. RJ never got autographs. Like, he didn't understand that concept, and he would twirl around and stim, and it was so hard for Rodney, because he always envisioned this kid being, he was the runner up for the Heisman Trophy. So he's like, my kid's going to get the Heisman Trophy. These are the things he had, right? So, and I would say we had a kitchen sink mentality, like we talked to you about, floor time versus, we did it all. Like, we just did everything. And like every kid responds differently to different stuff. Certain things worked, things didn't. And I would lean more on, what worked and all of that. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy was something that was really not talked about a lot then, but I was all the way in it. And I felt like he was more lucid. I felt like, really, out of all the things, including speech therapy, that was one of the things that I feel, I'm not a doctor, I'm just a mom, really helped take his inflammation down in his body and on his brain. And whenever he would come out of those dives, those sessions of, he would feel better in his body. He would talk more, be more verbally lucid. And it was like, wow. So we did that a lot. We invested in a chamber in our house, because going to the place was, well, we could afford to do that, right? Not many families can afford that, because they're expensive. And so we just slowly started seeing him come into himself. And it's funny, because we did these reality shows, which RG used to just cringe. He did not want to do that show, but he understood when people would see him out, they would say to him, oh my God, RG, like, watching you on the show has helped me and my daughters. This man walked up to us at a basketball game and said, what you've done just by seeing you has given us hope, and it makes our lives easier. And RG was like, wow, like, okay, like he was hearing the impact of it.
Wow.
So there's moments where he was embracing it, really loving it and being just this autism superhero. And then other moments, like, if y'all don't get that camera out of my face, so we had to, manage that. But he had to do these interviews. He had a camera in front of him where he was talking about, you have to do these interviews for reality TV where you have to do wraparounds and you have to tell what you feel. Well, Ryan,
right in between the scenes and everything. Yeah, yeah.
Everybody dreaded the interviews because it's grueling. You have to talk about stuff that you may have done like a week ago, and you have to talk to the camera as if you're not being interviewed. It's a learning curve. And so my kids didn't love it, but boy, did they learn a lot by doing that. Like now when I see them on any kind of interview, all four of them, they incorporate the question into the answer. Like they do all that stuff. So they've just been kind of trained with these 4 seasons. So that I started to notice certain things that he would say to me that he didn't normally say. And then he was just sucking in the world around him. And I think it's a combination of things. We were just blessed that he was able to grab language and grab the nuances of language. He still can't always legitimately understand certain things, but he asks, what does that mean? Right?
Beautiful.
That's huge. That's beautiful.
Really helped him beyond just giving him a paycheck was working for the Dodgers. So when they hired him, he not only learned, because how many baseball cliches are there? 1,000, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of one. It's not coming to me now, but the ones that we always know, like low and outside. That's not a good example, but
strike out at this, or you're gonna get to second base on that, or right?
Yeah,
like
right. In all of those, like now RJ after 7 seasons with them, it's just remarkable, like because they were so loving and nurturing to him and taught him the ropes and stuck with him when he would have meltdowns, when he would sensorily get overloaded, and they stuck with him. And so now, like when he goes to spring training, it used to be like tears. He was, scared and nervous. And now it's like, I'm out.
Yeah, because he's got to leave home to go. Because for those that don't follow baseball particularly closely, obviously the Dodgers play here in Los Angeles, but spring training is in Arizona.
Right.
Yes.
So that's like going away to college for however long spring training is. A month or two. Yeah.
8 weeks.
He goes and at the beginning, and his boss and I have this amazing text string where he's just like, wow, he's really grown up. Like, and then he used to cry when people got, DFA'd and cut and sent down to the minors because he bonded with these guys, and it was emotional.
Yeah.
And now, like, okay, so that was like in 2016. It's like it was a player he loved that left. I remember he got home and he jumps on the trampoline to stim after when he gets home at night.
Yeah, we have one of those too. Yeah,
right, and it really helps him. And he'll get home at like 2 a.m. sometimes, and he jumps on this trampoline, and then he would walk around and he would like kind of like talk to himself a lot still. And I was like, what happened? He goes, yeah, we lost this player and it's just not fair. And I don't understand. He was really bummed about it. Cut to last week. One of my favorite players, a player I really like got cut or whatever. And I'm like, RJ, what happened? What happened to AJ Pollock? I really liked him. He said, we have options, Mom.
I love that.
No more stimming, no more running around, no more crying.
Awesome. Wow.
Options. And
how did that come about?
Because the job. Okay, so we were doing Meet the Peetes. We're trying to find him a job on the actual show. So my mom wanted him to be a model because she said my grandson is fine and he needs to be a model. He did do some amazing photos, but he didn't like people touching him, and the girls would come in and drape on him. He was like, I'm sorry, RJ, that's not the look you're supposed to have in the picture, right?
Yeah.
Rodney wanted him to work at this Witch sandwich shop because he knew the manager, and he thought like that would help. It's about having someone there looking out for him. And then I thought he should work at the bird store because he would go to this bird store after school every day. He would hang out there, and he would like be obsessed with. He loves these animals. And the lady was like, do you want to clean up bird poop? He's like, yeah, sure, no problem. So, cut to our friend of ours was at Dodgers. He's a VP over there. And he said, I'm watching the show. Is he really looking for a job, or is that just fake TV? And I'm like, no, Lon, he's really looking for a job. So he goes, well, I'm going to have him come bring him down to the clubhouse, and let's have a meet. And maybe there's something he can do here. So that's really how it happened. He went down there 2016. We took him down there as if he was going to kindergarten, me and Rodney. We met with Dave Roberts. It was his first season. And so he was like, okay, RJ. And I was like, where are you taking him? He's like, we're going to get him some clothes and we're going to introduce him to the guys. And I'm like, can we come? No, Mom, to the clubhouse. So we got him. And the next thing you know, he comes back out in this Dodger and they gave him the job on the spot. And then Jock Peterson, who has a brother, older brother with special needs, of Down syndrome, came out and buddied up with him. And then
I was just about to ask about his relationship with Jock and Pujols is also is very involved, right?
Pujols, yes, Pujols. And I've been trying to, I really want to connect with Pujols because he's just. I didn't really realize his story about that, his whole story until recently, till after when he left the team, which bummed me out because he was just such a love in the clubhouse. And I loved, RJ comes home and has to tell me all these clubhouse stories. And I love the clubhouse stories about him. But Jock was the one. Jock and Justin Turner were the two that just pulled him in like a little brother, and they raised him. Wow. So he came home with all these cliches now that he never understood before. Now he's got them all. And when he breaks down a game, because he's right there next to Dave Roberts. So he hears everything and he almost mimics it. Wow. And so that's helped him really express himself. Now, the one thing it has taught him, though, is how to cuss.
I was going to say that must be that, because that's one of the things that, you want your child to be verbal and everything. And unfortunately, that's one of the things we're dealing with right now, too. Because my man is just like, you drop something. Oh, like, dude. He's like, and then he'll tell you, bad word, 4-letter word, bad word, S word. Sorry.
Sean, though, that dugout cussing is a whole nother thing.
I bet.
Oh my God! Well, offline, I'll tell you some funny stories. But that's good, though. It's part of him. He's a 24-year-old man. He should know how to cuss, right?
Yeah.
So we've just been really blessed for this journey and all of these angels on the path. Lon Rosen from the Dodgers, Magic Johnson, who was part of the Dodgers owners, known RJ his whole life. So we have had these resources, but that's why for HollyRod Foundation, we're really leaning in on these job training programs and really putting our foot on the necks of these corporations to say, you must hire these people because there are jobs that they do. And we also put had a really great new partnership this year with Delivering Jobs. And that's an organization, deliveringjobs.org. Please check that out too. They are an awesome organization. And I did a PSA with them where I played a human resources director and I hired someone on the spot.
I saw that.
Yeah. So that was something that was really special because that's what we're really trying to do. Let corporations know that these young people can work and sometimes be your best employee. They can diversify your workforce and your teams. Your teams are better off having these people. And every time I post anything about RJ and the Dodgers, and like every time someone leaves, whether it's Albert Pujols or when Jock left, that was hard. But anytime I'll post this post about him and I'll tag them, and they'll always like back channel me and go, you always thank us for being great to RJ, but RJ made our clubhouse brighter every single day. And that, so I could sob just thinking about that.
Yeah. But definitely.
The journey has been really amazing. Now he still has issues that we still work through. And he still has to manage a lot of his emotions and try to, and sometimes he still gets overwhelmed and gets on overload. And, I think the thing people don't know about being a clubby, it's hard manual work.
If it's physical work. Because he's got to pick up equipment and all that kind of stuff.
And then spring training, now he's back home. But like last night, he got home at 11 after, work, unloading the trucks. Then he goes home, takes a nap, then drives back down to the stadium to work the game. Yeah. And then, it's a lot of work, but that's why they're so well compensated and taken care of. And there's no turnover. So I'm like,
those other questions, just so he does drive.
Yes. And that was on the never list, right? He was never going to drive.
That's what made me ask, because we don't know if Elijah's going to drive. Is he going to live on his own? So I'm just soaking up every victory that I can get when I hear that.
We were told that, and that's why we wanted to, put it on blast. And like, and we were talking earlier, Rodney didn't want RJ to be on blast like this. It was a big, like, kitchen table conversation.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a big powwow, but I win because I always win all the fights. That's true, right? But he'll thank me. He says, I didn't see that. All I saw was I wanted to protect him. I didn't want him to be the football player, actor's son that, has autism and is helpless and all that. And I was like, no, we have to do this. And like I said, RJ, is reluctant some moments, but then he really gets it on others.
Yeah. I there's someone, one of our previous guests, and it's funny, again, here's the synergy again, because I happen to see this post today, and it says, an autistic professional is up to 140% more productive than an average employee when properly matched to a job that fits their skills. And it begins with, did you know that? And I'm like, no, I didn't know that. And I think that the light that it can be shined on corporations, because you're not talking about, these are people too, so therefore just give them a job. No, you're talking about a fit, and there's a process that's involved with all of those things, and
they need support. They have to have support in place, or else they'll have a job for a month and then they'll get fired because it won't work.
Right.
You need to have those people there that are proactively supporting them. We placed about 20 kids at Outback Steakhouse, but we have to train the assistant managers and managers there so they know how to deal with them. And, there were times when Nick Sanchez on the set of Our Christmas Journey, the actor with autism, he, needed some sensory time, and he was getting overloaded and he was getting too much direction. And I just told directors, let's move on to this. It's just because if you want to make it happen, you can. And not just the jobs, nothing wrong with these jobs, but not just the jobs of bagging groceries and working on store shelves, but interacting and interfacing with people, they can do that too. So we're making big strides. There's another organization called Disability In, and these guys are doing an amazing job. They have created almost just like Academy Awards for disability hiring, where they bring all the corporations from Walmart to Cigna, and they bring them all in together. And I discovered them a few years ago, and we're actually honoring, and you guys mark June 18th for Design Care. That's our upcoming fundraiser, which we'd love to have you guys there.
Thank you.
I haven't had it in 2 years, so it's a big deal to get it back up again. But we're honoring this amazing woman, Jill, who runs Disability In. And she has now made it cool for this hiring to happen. And
Fantastic.
They're all sort of like competing to see who hires the most. And then if you get to this point, so it's really awesome. And she's just an amazing autism employment coordinator, but just all across, not just autism, but, any kind of special needs and disability. And so I've met just so many amazing people on this journey, and seeing, what the possibilities are. And I just want to always be a vessel to share information with other people. And, folks look at RJ and they go, oh, he's verbal and he has this and he has you guys and of course he's doing okay. But trust me when I tell you this, that this young man has been fighting for himself. He's been advocating, fighting for himself to the ability that he can. He's had some awful moments in life, like awful moments. And so we must understand that this is like a whole thing that we have to, teach the world to look at our kids differently. And then they're going to thrive and embrace the neurodiversity and really work with it.
I got to tell you were
one of those.
Go ahead, Brian.
Go ahead, John.
Oh, well,
we'll talk over John.
I was just going to say, you just, for years have been one of the first symbols of hope for us, because I'm thinking, okay, so RJ drives, he does this, he does that. Because I always say that as a parent, your most difficult challenge is trying to strike a balance between giving your kid fish versus teaching them how to fish. And when you add the special needs component, regardless of diagnosis, the balancing act is 10 times more impossible, because you want to do, as we've heard the great Temple Grandin say that her mom did in the 50s, which is kind of like, no, you're going to figure it out on your own.
Yeah.
And to do that and resist the urge of, no, baby, let me just give you this fish. I'll teach you how to fish tomorrow. It's okay. But we're not going to be here to always fish for them too. So, you give hope. And that's why I'm always like, okay, so we're always trying to figure out, okay, maybe Elijah can do this. Maybe he can do that. Because we don't know if he'll, be able to piece the words together and express a little more clearly. Will he work? Will he, will he drive? This show is such a, people don't view me as selfish, but I think this show is in a way a selfish endeavor, because I get to speak with people like you, and I'm like, okay, so what about this? How did you do this? How did you do that? Which is not just an interview. I'm sitting there taking notes, because it's like, how did you get from point A to point B? Definitely.
I still do that when I do seminars, or when I go to or do speeches and whatever. Or the other night I moderated a panel for Jack and Jill, and these moms, Black moms, talking about their kids on the spectrum.
Great organization. Yeah.
Yeah. And like they were, I was learning stuff from them,
Mhm.
just so that's a very good thing to be able to use your platform that way.
Definitely.
Yeah. I had the same experience that you did with the Never Day, with my daughter, who's now 26. She'll be 27 in November. And she was diagnosed at 18 months. So we're talking about the same time frame, 1997, more or less. She was diagnosed with learning disabilities, not on the spectrum, but, challenges and apraxia. And so some cognitive, limitations. And we were told at that diagnosis of all the things that she wasn't going to do. She wasn't going to drive. She wasn't going to live alone. She wasn't going to have a job. She wasn't going to graduate school. All these things that are so, and again, as Sean said, very, very few places for us to go. There was no HollyRod at the time. There was no place where we could go. And in fact, the internet I think we were still using Prodigy back in the early days of the internet. And we were lucky enough to find a group that, that we just could share some commonalities, made us feel like we were part of something, that we weren't in it alone. And I think that that's the biggest challenge that families have. But like you said, we've got the receipts. She now lives in upstate New York. She's married. She has a job. She's a teacher. She drives to work.
See now I'm like, oh my God, she's married, because that's an area where RJ really struggling. He's not struggling in that they're not women that are.
There's opportunities, but you're talking about a future.
He doesn't understand, or he's scared to death to make those connections. He doesn't. Right. And I'll ask him, you ready for a girlfriend? He goes, not yet. But meanwhile, girls are calling me up talking about what's going on with RJ. and because he's so handsome, but he doesn't, and he's attractive because he doesn't know how to lie. He's pure. He's honest. Mm-hmm. He's everything these brothers out here aren't. And so it's just like, they love that. But what's my biggest fear? That somebody's going to come along. This boy got good credit, a good job, a paycheck, money in the bank, a car, a nice little whip. He's got all of that. Right. And I'm so worried that some girl's going to swoop in and empty his bank account bag. And then I'll be like, oh my God. So in some ways, I'm kind of glad that he's not going down this road, because that would be
there's that balance again, though.
Right. It's the balance.
We'll see. I mean, I just feel like I don't know. So Brian, when you say she's married and doing all these kinds of things, like that's what, in my mind, I'm sitting up here like Sean's kind of saying about RJ. I'm saying about your daughter, like, wow, like, and like, will my son ever get married? Will he ever have children? Those kinds of things. Yeah,
and it does. It's not without its set of challenges.
Sure.
And like RJ, I mean, Jordan has interpersonal issues, and sometimes she doesn't really know how to navigate those waters. And so, to your point, in some of the jobs that she hasn't had the support or a place that she could go to, to express. And, it became a big challenge for her. And relationships were a challenge, to your point. Men in this, in Los Angeles are not the greatest. They take advantage of women. I think that in any big city. And so that was a concern for us. So she moved to upstate New York, where her mom is, and it's a much smaller community, much tighter community. And so, it was great for us. And again, every day I literally talk to her every single day. And there are days that she has challenges, I'm sure, like your children do. And there are days when she's just like, Dad, I got this, and this is what I'm going to do. And we're going to fly and meet, her sister in Israel. And I'm going to go do this. And I'm like, man, every day I literally come to tears in, thinking about how far she's come from that day when we thought we had no idea what her future was going to look like. We had no idea what was going to happen. And so we're so grateful for the families that have, embraced her, and but like you said, like RJ, Jordan became an advocate, a self-advocate, and, standing for the things that were important to her. Sometimes not understanding what she needed, but being able to kind of find her way through all that. And like any relationships are difficult, and relationships, when you've got some special needs issues, and, in her case, against certain processing issues, like they have to communicate a lot. Yeah. And I think that's the one big thing we notice, that communication is key for our kids, communication and letting them express themselves and finding their paths. But I will tell you, like, walking her down the aisle was the greatest, even during the pandemic. It was one of the greatest moments of my life.
Brian, I would be on the floor. Just they'd have to. I would not know how. I can't even imagine. I mean, any of my kids, but like RJ, I can't even imagine it. So, but I love that story. Thank you so much for sharing that, because when I think about a girl like Jordan, and especially because with girls, these types of situations are can really impact them so differently. All of this stuff presents in a different way with women and girls, and I mean, just with everything, with sexuality, with dating, with just puberty, all of that, is and with boys too. Obviously, their puberty is a lot to handle, but having a girl and 3 boys, and really being that heavy boy mom, and then having my Ryan, who's kind of like my right hand, and it's just really great to hear that story. And I think one of the things that I wanted to bring up too, because I don't talk about it that often, but actually we did a whole campaign on it, so it's been out there. But Ryan really struggled being the twin sister of RJ. She was diagnosed with ADHD, but not until way later, and really struggled with that. And I was so busy on that Autism Express, and because he was the squeaky wheel, that she did not get the proper diagnosis early. I just call her. I just like, oh, she's just spacey. That's just Ryan. She's kind of spacey. She's all over the place. She doesn't, that's just who she is. I never did that. So that's what I always tell, other parents, that, you got to really pay attention, give that one-on-one time to your other kids, and really listen to them and observe them. And it's hard, because especially when you have autism and you have a son or someone with autism who you're focusing on. And we were doing that kitchen sink thing. So we were just like, you're good, Ryan. You're good. We got to, it's always that. And so if I had to go back and do something again, that would be the biggest thing I would change. I might be a little nicer to Rodney.
Well, that's where we learn, though. That's where we learn. We did a whole episode on that. And, there's some episodes where we don't have a guest, and Brian and I just talked for an hour about that, which is like, when you have children, how do you love them equally, but differently? Because each, a child with special needs obviously has a different quote unquote love language than a child who does not. And it's tough. So speaking of that, when you're talking about Ryan, I know that Ryan, you and Ryan wrote the book, My Brother Charlie, which I have and love, but you have a new book that is coming out with a new author that you're working with. Tell us about that.
Well, the new book is the follow-up to My Brother Charlie, called Charlie Makes a Splash. And instead of Ryan, or telling the story from a sibling's perspective, which is my brother Charlie's narrative, now RJ gets to be an author. Now, in all fairness, we have a book called Same But Different, which we also did, and both Ryan and RJ were authors, and it was more of a middle school book. But My Brother Charlie was very successful. So thankful for that. And I've been wanting to get Scholastic to do a follow-up to that for some time, and here we are. So it took us about 3 years. Obviously, we went through COVID too, and then supply chain stuff. So, I mean, it was supposed to come out in April, and now it's coming out in August. I guess they couldn't get the paper in. I don't know. Who knows? But the good news is it is available for pre-order. And so my brother Charlie, as I said, was about Charlie and Callie, and they're twins. And then Callie talks about how her brother can get on her last nerve, but what a great kid he is. And if you just try to get to know him or any kid with autism, you can make a friend for life. And so it's a beautiful, beautiful book. And the illustrations are amazing by Shane Evans. Amazing. And so Charlie Makes a Splash is more about Charlie's relationship with water. So for RJ, he wasn't really talking or connecting, but in swim class, that boy was a fish, right? He went down to the bottom of the water, and and all the other kids were crying, didn't want to get in the pool, and just not. And Charlie, RJ was the best in swim class. Now he would always be off when he was out of the pool. He would always be off to the side doing his own thing. But when he was in the water, sensorily, it just made him come alive. Same thing same thing in the bathtub at bath time. Same thing when it rained and puddles. I just had to let him go, let him get in that puddle, and that didn't happen much in LA, but like our football cities, like North Carolina, Philadelphia, they would get rain. And the aquarium just calmed him totally down, sensorily, everything for him. So it's about what water does. But we all know that with autism, a lot of the kids, if they're not, they can have trouble in water if they don't know how to swim.
If they know how to swim, and
they gravitate towards water because
they're drawn to it. We had an issue like that.
And so many issues like that, and there's so many heartbreaking issues like that. And so a lot of the back matter in Charlie Makes a Splash is about why we wrote the book and the connection and water safety, and then also we give you sort of challenges. If you just got this diagnosis today, look at this as a welcome to autism list.
Excellent.
These were things that I didn't see. I just didn't see them in 2000. I saw no. And Autism Speaks and some other organizations now have done toolkits and things like that. But sometimes those are intimidating to different people, like just the onboarding toolkits and things. So sometimes subliminally, if you put it in a children's book, after you finish looking at the beautiful pictures and the prose at the end, there's some really good, useful stuff that's coming at you, and you don't feel intimidated by it.
Nice.
So
that makes a big difference. We had an experience like that where, when Elijah was, I don't know, he might have been 6 or 7, something like that. Didn't know where he was for a couple of minutes. He was in the neighbor's pool, did not know how to swim, and and had gotten into the, into like the deep end and everything. I got over the fence, took him out, came back inside. Because his sister was asking, like, well, where is he? I thought he was with you. And I'd like go to the backyard and I'm trying to figure out, like, where is he at? And you're like, and I'm like, what is that? And I look over and he's like, water is coming up to his chin.
God, Sean, I can't even.
I got over that fence, got in that pool, took him out. And I don't remember the time between hearing him and getting in the pool. And after I took him in the house and brought him in, Laura started, taking the clothes off and getting him in the bath. And I'm just sitting there like, whew, man. And I'm just like, fine. Like, man, that was close. That was close. And I sat there and must have lost like 5 pounds of water weight right there. Cause I'm like, what if I wasn't home? So that's the other thing where I feel like, we're watched after and blessed, but we're getting close to that time. I want to do 2 things. Where can our audience pre-order Charlie Makes a Splash?
On the Scholastic website, it's all set up for pre-order. So if you just go, I think you'll have a link, but if you just go to scholastic.com and you put in Charlie Makes a Splash, boom, it'll come right up and it'll give you the option to pre-order it. And so we're really trying to push these pre-orders during April. And then when the actual book comes out in August, I hope you guys will have me back and we can talk about all the other stuff that
we love that.
Definitely
we love that.
The whole season from now, but it'll be cool.
Great.
So,
And then
go ahead, Brian.
Sean, you're going to ask your
Yes,
question.
yes. At this
All right.
point, we usually ask
Here we go,
the
Holly.
following question, Holly. You know, our ability to change the world is going to be obviously strongly determined by our ability or our willingness to change ourselves. So give us one example of a belief, thought, or philosophy that you really strongly believe but no longer believe to be true.
I believed it before and now I don't believe it.
Correct.
Oh, wow,
Mhm.
that's a good one. That's a good question. Oh, well, I think I believed about my son early on that he would never, I bought into the never day. And I'm so mad at myself for that, but I bought into the fact that he would never be able to have a full conversation with me and read fear on my face. When he was younger, like the story you just said, he ran into the middle of the street. And I was screaming bloody murder. He was in front of me, and he wouldn't stop. He didn't hear the fear, and so I had that out of body experience after that. And Rodney was far back; he could watch us, and I'm like, "Oh my God, is this man about to watch his son and his wife get hit by a car?" It was a bad moment. I thought he would never at that moment. I thought that would never change, that he would never be able to delineate what fear was. And now, 20 years later, when he sees me give him that look, we call that the black mama look. When we give him, he's like, what? Like, so I never thought that he would ever be able to read frustration or anger or anything.
Beautiful, though.
That's fantastic.
And so when I know what I know now is that that's a possibility. So if there's anybody listening to this conversation, and you're in that place now where you could be crying of frustration and your kid is just not even pay attention, not what's wrong, mom, or you okay? That there's possibilities for that to change or not, right? But then you just start to understand that they may see that you're in some kind of situation, but they cannot process it or respond to it.
Right.
So there's that too. But I think the biggest thing is just really, there were times people think I got the diagnosis and then went on this Norma Ray campaign where I was like, oh, everything's going to be great. And he's going to, don't change your son for the world, change the world for your son. That didn't happen until much later in this journey.
Right.
And so I just think believing in my son and believing the possibilities, but really believing it, not just telling myself, oh, well, he'll be really believing it and all of that didn't come till much later. So now today, when I look at him and I see the things that he's experiencing, I tell, other parents, I'm like, just have that hope. And if you don't get it in the form of your son or daughter being verbal, you'll get it in other ways. There are going to be other wins, small wins, and big wins too, that are going to really keep you going.
Excellent. Excellent.
Beautiful. Well, as we come to the end of our hour, and by the way, Holly, like, we know this happens to us on a regular basis. We get to the end of the hour, like, how the heck did that go by so quickly?
I know. Look, the sun has now
shifted.
I know. Yeah. I didn't close the curtain properly, and I'm like, whoa! I'm like one of those clocks, those shadow clocks.
Yeah.
Sundial.
That's what you become. Your sundial. That's it. So as we wrap, just first of all, thank you so much for being a part of our Just Two Dads podcast. We set out to do this, Sean and I, just two dads having a conversation about our kids and life, and realized that there was so much more value to having this conversation in a more public forum, because we get to find amazing warriors who are out there fighting for our children and for so many others, and warriors like yourself and Rodney, and what you guys are doing with HollyRod. And so, actor, author, activist, social media, you're even like, I don't know, there's influencer, and then there's Holly Robinson, right? So like, you're at a completely higher level. But we're so grateful for.
Thank you.
We're grateful for the work that you're doing for our children, and so amazed and so blessed to be able to hear the story about RJ and his success, and my hometown Dodgers. I love that they're taking care of him, and just great story. And I would say to everybody who's listening or watching, I hope that you got some great value. Again, go to scholastic.com, search Charlie Makes a Splash, pre-order the book. I'm sure if we have an opportunity to do that, we'd love to have you back on, Holly, and talk about it, as we get closer to the release date, because I think it's going to be such an important piece. And as it always ties in with how I like to wrap our show up, which is, with empathy and love. Right now, we don't know what other people are going through. And so have some empathy and have some understanding and just an awareness that you may not know what another person is going through, what the family is going through. So have some empathy. And if you can look through life through the lens of love, the world will be a more beautiful place. So
Amen.
Empathy and love, everybody. Yeah. So thank you again. And Sean's going to wrap our show up. And just such a pleasure.
Thank you, Brian. Great talking to you.
Yeah, and I just want to again thank everyone that took the time to tune in. As always, I want to thank the women in my life without whom I would not be, and that is my mother Jan and my amazing wife Laura. And again, just remember, everybody needs to be seen, everybody needs to be heard, everybody needs to know that they matter. And questions are so much more powerful than statements. Okay, so let's ask a couple more questions about people before we make any judgments, because in most cases we haven't even begun to sniff their shoes, much less walked in them, and we're all trying to figure it all out, and we need each other, generally speaking, but especially in the special needs community.
For sure. Thank you. We love you.
Love you too. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.